Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Planning and Housing Committee meeting number 11. I do want to acknowledge that Ottawa is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. Il est important de souligner que la ville d'Ottawa se trouve sur un territoire non cédé de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe, dont la culture et la présence sont enrichies et continuent d'enrichir ces terres. A particularly warm welcome this morning to Councillor Kavanagh and to our legal team. Kelly, who's here?
Councillor Brockington. Councillor Curry.
Here.
Councillor Dudas. Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Present.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Lowe.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Councillor Troster.
Here.
Vice Chair Gower.
Here.
You have quorum, Chair.
Thank you very much. So this is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 4.2 and 4.4 to 4.8 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for a zoning bylaw amendment and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments to these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on June 28th, 2023, please email or call the committee coordinator. Declarations of interest. I believe Councillor Johnson has declarations of interest to make.
Thank you. I do. So you want me to read it in now?
Please.
I, Councillor Lane Johnson, declare a potential deemed indirect pecuniary interest on the following items on the Planning and Housing Committee agenda of June 21st, 2023. Item 4.1, 233 Argyle and 330 McLeod Street. Item 4.2, 233 Argyle and 330 McLeod Street. And item 4.5, 15 and 17 Desoblatz Avenue, as my spouse has a financial relationship with the owners of the properties. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Are there any other declarations of interest? Seeing none. Confirmation of the minutes. Are the minutes of the meeting 10 Wednesday, June 7th, 2023 confirmed?
Confirmed.
Okay, so running through the agenda, we'll see what can pass. So item 4.1, applications to alter 233 Argyle and 330 McLeod, properties designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We have a related item 4.2, the zoning bylaw amendment for the same addresses. There is a presentation ready if we need one. However, there are no delegations on this item. Do you want to hold
I'd
that
just
item?
like to hold it to ask some questions.
Absolutely. So we'll hold that item. Item 4.3, request for development charge credit transfer, Nokia Canada. We don't have a presentation on that. There's no delegations. I believe we have staff available to answer any questions. Does anyone want that held? Okay, is that item carried? Thank you. Item 4.4, zoning bylaw amendment, part of 3265 Jock Vale Road in Barhaven West. We don't have any delegations on that. There is a presentation available if one is required. Is anyone interested in holding that item? I don't see so. The applicants are represented today by Paul Black of Foten and Carl Fernie at Minto. Paul and Carl, if the committee is prepared to carry this item, did you still wish to speak?
Morning, Mr. Chair.
Did you wish to speak to this item if committee's prepared to carry it?
Sorry, no, we don't need to speak to it. Thank you.
Okay. Is this item carried? Carried. Thank you. The zoning bylaw amendment at 15 and 17 Desoblatz. We have multiple delegations, and I would ask that the staff be prepared to make the presentation on that one. So we'll hold it. The zoning bylaw amendment at 211 Armstrong. Cheryl is here, so we'll hold that item. I have some questions of the planners as well. The item zoning bylaw amendment at 2420 Don Reed Drive. There's no delegation signed up for this one. Are any members of the committee interested in holding this item? I don't see that. And there's no applicant on this one, eh? Staff. Is that item carried? Carried. Thank you. The zoning bylaw amendment 1125 and 1149 Searville Road. We don't have any delegations to speak to this one. There is a technical amendment that I'll ask Vice Chair Gower to move now.
Thank you, Chair. Whereas the report seeks approval of an amendment to zoning bylaw 2008-250 for 1125 and 1149 Searville Road to permit a mid-rise and a high-rise residential use building containing a total of 366 dwelling units. And whereas a technical amendment is required to correct one error in document 2 of the report, therefore be it resolved that with respect to the report, Planning and Housing Committee amend document 2 by replace 2C1 over 6 stories, the setback 12 meters with over 6 stories, the western setback 7 meters. Replace 2C2 minimum setback from the westernmost lot lines 7 meters with maximum building height 6. Should that be 6.1 meters? Or 61 meters? We may need to get clarity from staff. I'll finish reading it. Remove 2C3 maximum building height 20 stories. And be it further resolved that pursuant to section 3417 of the Planning Act, no further notice be given. Can I just ask staff, is 61 meters correct? Okay, thank you. We're good, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see on behalf of the applicant, Peter Hume is here. Mr. Hume, if the committee is prepared to carry the amendment in the item, did you still wish to speak to it? Thank you. Is the amendment carried? Carried. Is the report as amendment carried? Thank you very much. There is a we'll get to that in a little bit. I can just preview. I believe Councillor Hill is withdrawing the item, the official plan amendment for 3809 Boris O'Kane Road. I don't know if Councillor Hill is online. No. So at the appropriate point in the agenda, that'll be withdrawn. So I am guessing I'm foreshadowing. So moving back to the items that were held. There is the 2 items that we held, 4.1 and 4.2, with respect to Argyle and McLeod Street. Do you want a presentation on that one?
No, I just have a few questions if that's okay for staff.
Okay, so we'll
For staff and also if the applicant is online.
yeah.
Thank you so much. So I just want to state up front, I don't have a strong objection to the application. I appreciate that the comments provided by many community members over the process, including the Centertown Community Association Heritage Ottawa. I think the project has been improved through addressing community concerns, so I wanted to thank you for that. But as with any project of this nature, I think the lack of 2-bedroom units is a real detriment to the area. It's creating more of the type of housing you will hear me talk about all the time at Planning Committee, smaller 1-bedroom or bachelor units. Could staff speak to how many applications are currently on the books from Smart Living? Do you have any sense? Because we have 2 applications at this committee meeting and I'm seeing a lot of them in my ward.
Mr. Chair, I'd be hesitant to ballpark that figure. It's a number of applications. We'd be happy to take that back and give you a proper number.
Sure. I'm just curious about how it compares to other developers in the city because we're seeing a lot from this company. I was wondering if the applicant can speak to how you're able to scale up so quickly, given the reasons the industry often cites as the slow pace of construction, because you really do have a lot of projects going on in the ward and in the city.
I'm not sure. We do have representatives from Smart Living specifically, and they were joining online, so I'm not sure if
Okay,
they're
that's fine.
jumping on or not, but I can say as the consultants, we get the approvals, and then when they decide to build is up to them. And there's a lot of, specifically in the downtown, in the areas that are tight like this, like construction does require a lot of consideration for shoring and in tight spaces. And there's a lot of approvals that have to sort of happen once you get that development approval in hand.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure of the timing specifically for this project. If we get approval here today, we still have the site plan to finalize. And then is it a September start, or are they looking in spring next year? I don't know. I can't answer. So
Might not also not know the answer to this question. I can follow up with the developer after, but do you know if Smart Living has sought funding through the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, the Co-Investment Fund, or any other federal funding stream designed to increase housing affordability?
yesterday they did ask questions about how the city defines affordability. So I think that there is some, I'm making an assumption here. I think that they're looking into it, but that's something we can definitely follow up with them on.
It's my understanding that Smart Living is able to expand in this way because they've been able to access private equity capital. Is this correct?
I don't know. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay. The only reason I'm asking these questions is just to point out that Smart Living was recently financed by a global investment firm. They're a big financialized housing provider, and they have a lot of developments in the ward. And overwhelmingly, what we're seeing is they're fully furnished, they're expensive, they're small, and they're designed for a very specific kind of tenant. And again, I don't have a specific problem with this project. It's not displacing anyone. There are other projects in my neighborhood where they're certainly displacing people and replacing much more affordable, larger homes with tiny, much more expensive homes. So that's simply the point I wanted to make, just to have that on record. But I don't have a problem with this particular project. And I think you and they have done a really nice job with the conversion. So thank you very much.
I think Jules Lozon is with the Smart Living. He has his hand up. Councillor Troster, did you want to
Sure.
entertain? Okay,
Hi.
Mr. Lozon, please go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I missed the first question, but the last question, I just wanted to understand what information you had about global funding.
Yeah, I understand that the
Why, if
company
you
recently
could expand that.
recapitalized or received a large amount of funding from a large investment company.
That's incorrect information. I'm not sure if we want to talk about that offline, but I'm not sure where that's come from.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to be corrected.
Great.
Okay. And do you know offhand if Smart Living has accessed any federal funding specifically for affordable housing?
No, we don't. Like Lisa said, we have been looking at the CMHC programs, but nothing, the ones that you mentioned.
Okay, you haven't accessed any of them yet, though.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for members of the, I would have both the staff and applicant? Seeing none. And I just want to confirm as well, Councillor Johnson did turn off her camera before this item started as she's conflicted, so she has not been participating in this debate. Is that item carried? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Or both items, 4.1 and yeah. You get it. Okay, the next held item is for 15 and 17 Desoblatz Avenue. And I would ask that the planners provide us with a presentation on what is being proposed, at which point we will turn to questions or we'll give the opportunity to the applicants to make a presentation of their own. And again, I would ask the applicants just to focus on items that haven't been covered by our staff. At which point we will, the committee will have a chance to ask questions of the applicants. Then we'll move into delegations, of which we have, I believe, 3. So staff, please take us away.
Sorry, just bear with me. I'm just getting my video set up here. Okay, I'll just get started without video for now and hopefully you'll be able to see my face shortly. So my name is John Bernier. I'm with the Planning, Real Estate and Economic Development Department. And I have before you here a zoning bylaw amendment. And I will say that there's an associated site plan application for 15 and 17 Desoblatz. Next slide, please. So see here, the site is located in Old Ottawa East. It's east of Main Street and Springhurst Avenue intersection. It is on the north side of the developing Greystone Village community. Next slide, please. The site is a rectangular through lot that has frontages on both Springhurst Avenue and Desoblatz Avenue. The properties immediately north and east are predominantly low-rise residential. To the west and south are mid-rise, mixed-use, and residential buildings. The site is currently occupied by a large building, which is the former site of the Convent of the Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus Order. And the site contains a number of surface parking lots, a culturally significant statue, and a number of mature trees. Next slide, please. So in terms of the zoning, the property is split zoned as R4 UD with exception and holding symbol, and R5B with exception and a holding symbol as well. The site is split zoned, which is basically reflective of the Old Ottawa East secondary plan following the height schedule to ensure proper transition to the properties to the north. So the R4 portion permits a low-rise apartment building. The R5 portion permits a mid-rise apartment building with a maximum height of 6 stories. Next slide, please. Okay, so the proposal includes, oh, I think we're still needing to go to the next slide. Anyways, okay, so the proposal includes redesignating to the closest fitting zoning, which is R5B, with exception and a schedule to regulate height, setbacks, stepbacks. And the schedule will recognize all setbacks of the existing structure, which is shown as area C in the graphic. It will introduce the building addition shown as area B and under area A. The height of the entire building is a maximum of 15 meters, which equates to a 4-story low-rise structure. Area A is meant to demonstrate the permitted location of the proposed enclosed amenity space. The intention is to allow the amenity space to project to a maximum of 4.5 meters above the 4th floor to a maximum floor area of 350 square meters. And the setbacks ensure the step backs of this structure ensure that the rooftop structure is inset to reduce the impression of a larger building from the street and to provide approximately 8 meters of separation to the western lot line. And I'd say about 10 to 11 meters of separation between the existing building and this structure on the roof. Next slide, please. Okay, sorry, one back actually. There you go. So this site-specific exception includes relief from the required resident parking. For reference, the proposed building with 284 units in its current iteration would require 136 parking spaces, and the request is for 0 resident parking spaces. As a result of this request, staff suggests a number of provisions related to the transportation demand management strategy, which I'll expand on in a later slide. But briefly, the amendments would include a minimum bicycle parking rate of 1.3 spaces per unit, ability for up to 5 visitor parking spaces to be used for car sharing, 2 front yard parking spaces would be permitted on Desoblatz Avenue for the exclusive use of car sharing. And there's an additional amendment required for a small portion of the parking lot, which will have a 0-meter landscape buffer. Next slide. So the site is designated as neighborhood low-rise and neighborhood mid-rise within the Old Ottawa East Secondary Plan, Policy Area 3. This policy encourages a variety of residential buildings, types and tenures, complementary building and landscape design, with an emphasis on appropriate transition to the low-rise residential neighborhoods to the north. It is located within the urban transect policy area of the official plan, which encourages a more urban, mid to high density style development. It is also within the evolving neighborhood overlay, which supports low-rise intensification with a focus on supporting a 15-minute neighborhood. I've also included reference to an important section of the official plan that seeks to encourage the shift to a more sustainable and active mode of transportation. And this formed a crucial part of the recommendations for the reduction in parking on site. So in essence, the policy within this section states that we shall support active modes through reductions and in some cases outright removal, as is suggested here, of the parking requirements for sites that are within 800 meters walking distance to a transportation hub. And in this case, the site is within proximity to Lee's O train station. Next slide, please. So you'll see here the current iteration of the site plan. The proposal is for the adaptive reuse of the former convent building and a 4-story addition on the northwest corner of the property to allow for a 284-unit low-rise rental apartment building. The building would include a variety of studio, 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. And I'll say that there's a total of 57 2 and above bedroom units in this plan. In terms of amenity space, there are a variety of at-grade amenity areas, including the courtyard to the northwest, and a rooftop terrace and an enclosed rooftop amenity structure. There is a surface parking lot accessed from Springhurst Avenue to the north. This is a slight expansion of the existing parking lot and will include 27 visitor parking spaces, which is the minimum requirement under the present zoning bylaw. The Desoblatz frontage will be greatly improved through the proposed development. The latest iteration of the plan includes a continuous concrete sidewalk, at-grade bicycle parking spaces, 2 dedicated car share spaces, and a large amount of landscape improvements such as 15 trees and numerous shrub plantings. So there's a mid-block connection also located along the western property line, something that the community was asking for and is being provided. And a public park will be secured through the following site plan approval, the design of which will be subject to further public participation. Next slide, please. So here's a view of the building addition from the Springhurst side, looking southeast. And it offers a good view of the mid-block connection that I was just discussing to the right in this image that would lead you to Desoblatz. This perspective also offers an idea as to how the amenity structure will look like from the street level, being set back quite significantly there. Next slide, please. So the applicant and ownership team has agreed to a comprehensive transportation demand management strategy meant to encourage alternative modes of travel. And this is to offset the pressures that would be caused by not providing any parking. These measures include bike parking rate that exceeds the number of bedrooms at 1.3 units or spaces per unit, I should say. 10 bicycles available for rental, a preloaded Presto card for tenants upon execution of a lease within the first year, and the value of which will allow for a monthly pass and also cover the cost of the Presto card itself. A property manager will be available 24 hours a day to monitor the visitor parking lot and offer concierge service to residents for travel directions and advice. And there will be 2 permanent car share spaces on Desoblatz, and the ability for 5 of the visitor parking spaces to be used for car share on a need-to basis. And finally, there will be a notice, something that's standard within our site plan agreements whenever there's parking pressures or reductions in parking. A notice in each lease agreement notifying tenants that parking is not available on site and that on-street parking is not a viable option for them. Next slide, please. So, yeah, in my review of the proposal, it's consistent with applicable official plan policies, secondary plan policies, and meets the intent of the zoning bylaw. And next slide. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, that's clear enough. We'll move on to the applicants. If you have a presentation to make.
We do, thank you.
Thank you. While that's coming up, I just again wanted to confirm that Councillor Johnson, who declared a conflict on this, turned her camera off immediately and is not participating in this debate.
So good morning, and through you, Chair, FOTEN and the applicant team who are with me today, they should be popping up on the screen. Want to thank city staff and the councillor's office and the community for their input and the many meetings we had with iterations of this plan. What's presented by John is a result of great dialogue on the adaptive reuse and addition to the convent at 15 and 17 Desoblatz Avenue. Next slide, please. So as John indicated, the site is within Old Ottawa East. It's located east of Main Street and has frontage on both Desoblatz and Springhurst Avenue. It is close to the Lees LRT station. It's designated neighborhood in the official plan and further refined in the policy of the Old Ottawa East secondary plan, which designate these lands as residential low rise, which is fronting Springhurst, and residential medium rise fronting Oblatz. These designations permit heights up to 4 stories on Springhurst and 6 stories on Desoblatz. The current zoning aligns with the secondary plan's designations. So the amendments being requested, oh, sorry, next slide. The amendments being requested will facilitate the reuse of the existing convent and accommodate a new addition along adding approximately 284 all-inclusive apartment rental units of varying sizes. The team is still working with the city on finalizing the site plan details. However, we do want to point out that the new park will be the home of the relocated Blessed Virgin statue, as well as the publicly accessible mid-block pathway connection is provided through the providing porosity through the site. So that's shown by that red dashed line along the western side of the property. Next slide. The zoning amendments requested today will remove the holding provisions and create a site-specific zone for this project, one that recognizes the uniqueness of this redevelopment. The site will no longer be dual zoned and a park will be set aside as open space. The proposed building setbacks consider the existing setbacks of the covenant, and the addition aligns with the current requirements of the R4 UD zone, which is what's in place today, where a side yard is supposed to be 1.5 meters. The addition is set back 4 meters. The area shown in orange, which John alluded to, is a rooftop enclosed space that's made up of mechanical needs along with other amenity space to complement the outdoor rooftop elements, such as a bathroom. It was designed considering the existing building to the west and will not look any different than a mechanical penthouse would, which is a permitted use. There are no windows on that west side, and the placement also offers a buffer to the more active outdoor rooftop amenity space running parallel to Springhurst. Next slide. John did go through this. These are the parking TDM measures, so I visualized it a little bit on this screen. But as indicated, we are looking for a reduction of no resident spaces. However, we are meeting the visitor requirement. We did look at providing underground parking. However, in addition to cost, it also would have a reduced footprint as it could not be provided under the existing covenant. And with the parkland, it can't be under that as well. So the amount of parking that could be provided by underground would not meet the zoning. And therefore, we can argue that in some cases, providing some resident spots give the hope to people moving in that a spot might open up and would therefore park on side streets until the opportunity came available. So we decided to just eliminate that opportunity from the beginning. So people moving in know that they will never be able to park on site. And that a notice on title and in their leases would indicate that street parking is not a viable option. So the comprehensive demand management strategies that John has gone through are now visualized. So the parking rate is exceeding the total number of exceeds the total number of bedrooms proposed on the site. So opposed to unit, we're doing it by bedroom. So that equals 1.3 per unit. There's indoor spaces with a dedicated elevator to bring those up to that through block connection. There is 10 rental bicycles that will be made available for those that don't have a bike. There's car share spaces along Oblatz. Those are shown in purple with the ability to convert more if required and there's a demand. The preloaded Presto cards, and there also is that 24-hour property manager who we're sort of calling the active transportation concierge, who's going to be able to help direct people to the bus stops, help them with the rental bikes, help them load up or become a member of the car share service. So those are being done to offset the demand, to encourage people to use those alternative measures that exist in close proximity to the site, if not on the site. So last slide, please. So hopefully we have demonstrated that this adapted convent and new addition aligns with the policies of the official plan, creating a pedestrian-friendly environment with reduced parking to encourage residents to utilize the more sustainable forms of transportation that exist. The development will add diversity to an existing unit mix and contribute to an already viable example-setting 15-minute community of Old Ottawa East. So with that, I'm going to thank you for your time and we welcome any questions. We are joined by the architects, Woodman Architecture. We've got representatives from the Smart Living and Forum. It's a joint partnership for this project, as well as CGH, our transportation consultants on this file. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there are questions for you. The first are coming from Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Overall, I like this. I read all the comments from the community. They're not happy about the parking situation predominantly. But, you know, you're right in between Ottawa U and St. Paul. There's only one really close little elementary school. I guess my question is, would these units not be geared towards university students or a particular type of person? Not a family necessarily? I mean, there's also Viscount Alexander over there, but that's a small little school and Lady is just alternative. I can't see families, yet I'm hearing 3 bedrooms, so maybe there'll be students renting multiple students.
I guess I can take that, and if someone from Smart Living or Forum wants to jump in on the sort of tenant mix and who they think the prospective tenants are, they're not specifically designed for anything. The 3-bedroom units are partly in response to sort of the official plan and having large family units. Whether or not they'll be rented by a family or 3 friends, 3 young professionals, could be could also be a group of older people that potentially want to live together, family. We don't know. Like, it's not designed specifically for any use. The amenity spaces are, you know, there's a gym, there's a rooftop amenity, so it's not specifically designed for one group. But we do anticipate it's probably a young professional person that's in this, whether they're, you know, nurses or doctors from the hospitals who are, you know, shift workers who don't necessarily need a bigger living space. So I don't know if anybody else wants to comment further on that from our team, but that's sort of what we've been led to understand as to who the target is for this.
Thank you, Lisa. My name is Vimal Lad. I'm here on behalf of Forum SLP. Just to add to what Lisa had mentioned, we're not limiting this to any particular demographic or whatnot. This is available for anyone. We provide a variety of unit types to facilitate, or unit types, a number of bedrooms to facilitate, an opportunity for an array of demographics who are looking to find a home in the area.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Chair, one of the committee meetings a few weeks ago, I learned that requirement for 3 bedrooms is not it's not out in Canada because we have so many other options for 3 bedrooms. So because people in Canada are often asking for apartment units with 3 bedrooms and they all are 1 and 2. But this has 3. Is this because there is a requirement for 3-bedroom units? And if that requirement weren't there, we wouldn't necessarily have 3 bedrooms?
I could speak to that. There is no zoning requirement for 3-bedroom units. It exists within the R4 UD or R4 designations, which requires a percentage of the units be 2+ bedrooms.
Oh, so not specifically 3, but two or more?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was that there had to be a certain number of 3 to try and round out that whole neighborhood for offering that, but that's not the case, just 2 or more. And is it absolutely required?
Sure. Chair, I think what the councillor is referring to is a discussion at a previous planning committee where we were talking about high-rise developments in a different designation hub where there's a policy direction encouraging 3 or more bedrooms, 5% or 10%, depending on the development, which has not been part of our implementing zoning bylaw to date. So I think you're thinking of a different context, which doesn't apply to this site, but this zoning does have a requirement to look at 2 or more bedrooms for this unit.
Okay, so what I'm understanding then is that by choice, like you're offering 3-bedroom when you don't even have to. Okay, good. All right. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry, and I'll just issue my own caution through the course of this debate that we speak in the official plan about a diversity of housing types. Every neighborhood should be served by all kinds of different housing, and I'll just warn the committee against veering into a discussion of people's own. Not that you did, but we do want to make sure that we're shying away from that. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning to you. Can you let me know what the application date of your file was? When did you formally submit your application?
I unfortunately, being hybrid, can't just pull that up, but I'm sure maybe one of the colleagues or teammates, I want to say it's been in for at least a year. February, I want to think, of 2022, but that's complete speculation.
Okay.
I just don't have that on me, sorry.
That date is not noted.
Yeah, so it was prior to the new official plan being brought in.
Okay. Can you speak to the affordability of units here? I applaud you for the diversity in the units, which I think is necessary, but are any earmarked as affordable units?
Not by definition of affordability, no,
Okay.
but they are all inclusive. So they do include all the furniture, including your plates, cups, cutlery, your internet, all of that is included in your price.
What would it cost to build 248 underground parking spots?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they've done that pro forma. But it would be a lot of layers just because of the footprint itself. It wouldn't just be one surface layer. You'd be going deeper. And with the river being there, I'm assuming that there might be some issues with the depth that you can actually go.
It would be very expensive.
Yes, I can say that.
Very
yes.
You cited it cost as one of the reasons for not proceeding with parking, which would have to be underground parking. How are these cost savings being reflected in the rents that you're going to be charging here in this location? You've acknowledged none will be affordable units. So if there's a request not to provide any parking, what's the compromise offset for the community, for the residents who are going to live here?
It's a great question. I'm not sure if the Smart Living team or Forum is able to jump in on the costing of that.
Absolutely. Vimal Lad from Forum here again. Just want to add to the fact that even though, underground parking is not being provided, the alternative to this that we're kind of introducing here is geothermal. We're going to be introducing ESG measures for geothermal on site, which also impacts the ability to have any underground parking. So that's, in lieu of understanding the site, understanding that underground parking is not a possibility on site, given the fact that there's an existing building there. We are introducing geothermal as a proactive ESG measure on the site to entertain green energy on the site and heating and cooling.
Okay, so that's part of the building structure, but no one can confirm that as a result of deciding not to build parking on site, which will likely save this company millions of dollars, there is no offset planned in the rent or in affordable housing units for future tenants. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair. The intention of this is that we will be introducing market rent units for this project. Affordable units are not contemplated for this project.
Okay, fair enough. And can you just clarify, I appreciate the report, and I heard again clarified this morning that leases will indicate that parking is not provided. What exactly, and again, I don't want to put you on the spot, but what is that exactly will that say in the lease? Will it specifically just say that your unit does not come with parking?
I believe that the city actually has standard wording that we would just copy over.
Okay.
Chair, I can elaborate on that. It's part of a site plan agreement. So we have a condition that will require a notice on title, and it goes into a municipal consent agreement that the owner will sign, acknowledging that every time they lease a unit, there'll be a clause in that lease notifying a potential tenant that the development does not come with parking. So there's a warning right there in your lease before you sign it.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, thank you.
A quick follow-up on that. The new language that I saw, I think for the first time today, is that would also include language that says parking on the street is not a viable option.
That's correct, Chair.
So I think that's new. I haven't seen that in any of the applications before us. I'm wondering if you can send the committee the wording that the site plan is going to require be included in the lease, just so we have a chance to see that. Obviously, no huge rush, but at some point in the next few days, that would be great before council. Apologies, Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks for this presentation and appreciate the work that's gone back and forth with this application in some of the improvements that we've seen over that time. I did want to say I know that there's mixed views on this within the community. We'll hear that from delegations. The adaptive reuse of this building, obviously a very important piece in terms of maintaining that heritage structure while also adding some units into an area that is certainly developing into a much more important modal share shift in our city. And obviously the minimum parking requirements, those things are always a topic of discussion, but something that I think the TDM measures here have really accounted for. And I don't think we've seen an application like this before where those TDM measures are put in place to such a vociferous type of way. So I appreciate that work from the applicant on that side. I did want to ask about the car share. So on the site, I think there's two that are indicated for sure in the front area, and it can go up to 5. I'm just wondering what's that trigger for going up to more car share spaces in terms of mitigating the lack of parking. Otherwise, like there's 27 visitor spaces, and I think 5 of which can be used for car share, and then there's 2 dedicated car share spaces in location in the front yard. So I just wanted to clarify, how many do you think there'll actually be there at build out, and where are they located?
So the intention is at first occupancy, those first 2 spaces along Oblatz will be car share. The zoning has been designed so as demand dictates, you can change up to 5 of the visitor spots to car share without triggering a rezoning for a lack of visitor spaces. So ultimately, there could be 7 car share spaces. And that'll be partly the responsibility of that property management company to see, to weigh the use of the visitor spaces versus the car share, to see if those car shares are used continuously and they want to convert 2 new visitor spaces to car share. That flexibility is going to be there. So it could be on an ad needed basis. The one thing is these car shares will be provided by a third party. So the availability of those spaces also is dictated by the ability to sign up a new car share space over.
Thank you for that. There is going to be a preloaded Presto card. It says for the first occupants. I just wanted to get clarity on that. So is it all new residents that would move in? Would it be if there's a move out and a new resident moves in again after that move out, would they also have a preloaded Presto card? I just wanted to get some clarity on how that'll work.
I'm going to pass that over to Vim because he was involved with those conversations in the city.
Through you, Chair, it's for the first occupants.
Okay, I guess I would just give direction that we should be working on that for, new residents that might come in, but then also if there's a move out and other residents move in there, obviously if you're wanting to keep this level of modal share up, then that's a very helpful item. So I would just hope to direct staff to continue working with you on that aspect as the build out happens. I think that's an important piece as we proceed with site plan and other areas with this site. To keep that up, because there'll be changeover here, right? It's not just going to be people living there in perpetuity. There's going to be a lot of shifts. There's a lot of furnished units, and so there'll be certainly a big student population. So probably we'll see a lot of move-ins, move-outs, and so that's going to be an important piece that for those move-ins we continue that aspect. And so I would just ask that you continue working on that piece. We did talk a lot about affordability here too. And of course, adding units, does some minor amount for affordability, but at the end of the day, without actual purpose-built affordable housing, that's a difficult thing to achieve. So on the affordability, we've talked about a contribution to an affordable housing fund within the ward. I presume you're still open to a contribution of that sort for other affordable housing in the ward. We've had these discussions. Can you just confirm that you are open to that?
Through you, Chair, we're open to that discussion. We can continue to have that discussion as we progress through the approval process.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. I'll have other just questions and comments for staff, but I did want to say, thank you for the work with the community. I know this is not an easy file. I know there's been a couple of different consultations on this. We've held one. There's been a city issued one. We've worked a lot on this, and this is a new thing for the city with mandatory minimum parking limits. And I think a lot of this is recognizing that without the mandatory minimum parking there, or if you have mandatory minimum parking, you are inviting more cars into the neighborhood. And so I try to make that discussion point known that if you've got a lot of parking there, you're going to see a lot of cars in and out. If you don't have a lot of parking there, then people make different choices when they live there. Not all of them will certainly just bike and walk and take transit. Some people will have cars that live here, and it's the mitigation of that is important here. So I appreciate the TDM measures and staff's work with you directly on that. And the work with our office, and looking forward to hearing the delegations on this too. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilor Menard. Councilor Kelly.
Sorry, Chair. My questions were actually for staff. Should I hold off on that line of question?
Yep, we'll hear the delegations first, and then we'll go to questions of staff. Councilor Troster.
Thank you so much. I was just wondering if you could let us know what you anticipate the target rent to be for apartments of various sizes. Given that I've heard Smart Living refer to this as a product. This is a fully furnished, as you said, right down to plates and cutlery. I just want to get a sense of what the anticipated rents will be.
Again, I think I'm going to direct that over to Vim over at Forum. Again, we're a couple years out from this, so a number we give today might not necessarily based on 3 years from now when they're actually first occupant, but I'm sure that they've done a little bit of work on that.
Through you, Chair. In terms of what those rents are, they have not been determined at this time yet. The intention is that we will complete a thorough market study, and we will over the course of time. And the intent is that these units will be market rent.
Okay, but can you give me an estimate? Because when we talk about market rent plus everything else you're offering, and we're talking 3-bedroom, like, are we talking 4,000, 5,000? Like, if you had to ballpark it, I'm curious first of all, about what you would charge for some of these larger homes, and also who might be interested in a fully furnished larger home right down to plates and cutlery.
Through you, Chair. The opportunity by providing a fully furnished home is kind of like a one-stop shop where people have the ability to move in ready places rather than having to seek furniture and all these various items that a new home would need. In terms of what the rents would be, I would have to look into it further and get back to you on that.
Okay, I mean, these are the same questions I had about a development that the same developer is planning on Bank Street. I'm really puzzled as to the audience for this quote unquote product. Would you consider renting any of the larger homes as unfurnished with a more typical rent for a unit that size?
Through you, Chair, the intent is to have these fully furnished. But that is the intent of this, is that this is a type of product that's not, really out in the market yet in this particular area, and to provide a variety in that sense where, there's an opportunity for a tenant to come in where everything is fully furnished.
So I'm assuming you assume these are going to be shorter term tenants then, or are you targeting longer term tenants with a product of this nature?
Through you, Chair. These aren't month-to-month leases or any of that. The intention with these are long-term tenants. I unfortunately can't speak on behalf of the tenure of how long someone would stay within this unit. However, the intent is that these are not month-to-month leases that we're proposing on the site. These are leases that people will be locked in for, and hope to have tenureship on through their stay.
Okay, well, I'll just go ahead and comment and say, I cannot imagine anyone wanting to live more than a year in a home where they didn't own or choose a single item in the apartment. And I'm very curious about this model that you seem intent on expanding in the city of Ottawa in a number of locations, including my ward. And I'm just incredibly puzzled as to, other than students or perhaps wealthy international business people who might come in for a few months and want a fully furnished apartment, I cannot imagine an Ottawa resident being able to afford to move into units of this nature or wanting to live in a home where they literally don't choose a single item. This seems to be a model that you're intent on expanding. And I will just put it out there. I think for the larger homes, you might want to consider renting some of them as a typical apartment if you actually do want to target longer term tenants. Otherwise, as Sean, as Councillor Menard and other folks have been saying, the neighborhood can expect a lot of move-ins and move-outs. Now, granted, people aren't necessarily coming with stuff if the apartment is fully rented, but I'm just really perplexed by the determination to expand this financialized hotel style model in a city where what we need are more permanent homes for people. So again, there's nothing specifically with the built form that I object to, just like in my own ward, there's nothing with the built form for what you're intending on Bank Street that I object to. But I think this model is pernicious. I think it's dangerous. I think it's very expensive. And I think it's not creating the kind of homes that we need in this city. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Troster. So yeah, I obviously a subject about which you have some very strong feelings. I will make sure that we are aware there are 7 particular forms of zoning relief that the applicant is seeking, and our decision today is with respect to whether or not those are appropriate. I don't see any other questions for the app. Oh, Councillor Kavanaugh. Oh, mine. Again, it's going to be as bad as it was the last planning committee. Worst chair ever.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much. I wanted to know about property management and if there are concerns. I've had issues in my own ward, but it's who you call, and is there going to be a published number, a voice on the other end for people in the neighborhood who have concerns about the property? And this is related to waste management because seen that before. If people aren't there very long, sometimes there's garbage problems. And as well, since I'm just hearing about this contract that says to make them aware that there's no on-street parking, what if they do? Who should they call in terms of the property management? I want to make sure that that is published so that people can call them.
The intention here, unlike some other smaller properties with the number of units that are being proposed, it'd be 24-hour on-site property managers. So yes, there will be a number and a person potentially to be able to answer and direct questions and concerns to not only from the residents inside, but also from the outside trying to get a hold of somebody. It would similarly operate, I would say, like a condo board where you do have that sort of person that is the presence of the operation. And Forum and SLP are not, they are a bigger organization, so their chances are you're going to be able to find somebody to talk to about specific issues, especially if it's pressing.
Okay. I don't know if I missed it, but what is the waste management proposals?
So the waste management, there is the addition is going to, currently they just sort of have some bins in some of those surface parking lots. With the development, the addition is going to be having a ground floor garbage room enclosed in the addition. So there's no outside storage anymore. And then garbage day, the bins will get rolled out and picked up and then put back in.
And
so it'll be internal to this, into the building.
What about recycling, composting?
Yeah, so like that part of the circulation through the site plan, we did receive comments from waste management indicating how many bins we needed to ensure that the right number of units were accommodated for and the bins being provided. And we actually did have to readjust the size of that garbage room to make sure we were accommodating what the city had suggested were appropriate amounts.
Okay, so if there's any concerns about property maintenance, any concerns about, littering or whatever, there'll be someone to answer to. They can knock on a door or they can phone.
Yeah, and I've seen on some smart living buildings, there's like a plaque on the front that does include a number. So I'm not sure if that's something that can be implemented here where it's visible from the outside for general inquiries and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kelly?
Yeah, sorry, just one question that came out of Councillor Kavanaugh's line of questioning. Will there be a compost option in that garbage room?
Yes, there is organics.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions for the applicant while they're in front of us? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. We'll move on to the public delegations, the first of whom is Adriana Beeman. Adriana, if you want to come up to the front, there's the same microphone that Lisa's been using. Thanks. Do you have a presentation?
To speak as fast as I can. No, I tried to limit to 5 minutes and I've rehearsed and it goes a little bit over. So if you could indulge me, I would greatly appreciate it. And I'll try to slow down because when I got it to 5 minutes, you're not going to hear anything I say. So I really appreciate your patience. And good morning again. I'm a resident of Old Ottawa East and a neighbor to the proposed development. My chief concerns are no parking for future residents, the development's poor fit within the city's existing plans, and the inappropriate design of the addition and the categorization of that fifth floor amenity space. I just ask you to consider the following. Greystone Village's original approved plan didn't include the community center within a school, a retirement home housing a long-term care facility. These new features, wonderful, but they increase traffic and on-street parking due to school buses, employees, and visitors. So now the maximum density of Greystone that was planned of 1,000 has been surpassed, and it's projected to be doubled. Successful infill and intensification must be implemented into the context of the entire true surroundings. Official plan policies are essential for the betterment of our city, but one cannot ignore our neighborhood's ability to implement them successfully. For example, steps taken to create a vibrant and pedestrian-friendly Main Street in a 15-minute neighborhood can be undermined when excessive density creates unsustainable traffic congestion, making people reluctant to carry on neighborhood businesses or to frequent them. The City Transportation Master Plan policy supporting sustainable transportation modes, aiming for reducing or eliminating parking requirements in specific areas, are innovative and admirable, but they're not yet proven. Our community and visitors already struggle to cope with this increased density. With already limited on-street parking, this is not a specific area quote to warrant eliminating parking requirements from 136 to 0. The staff recommendation relies on the owner's TIA and that comprehensive demand management strategy, which the strategy, yes, can aid in reduction, but not elimination of necessary on-site parking. Pre-Greystone development traffic studies used are inadequate and should be updated. Good planning decisions should not be founded on the unproven assumptions that all tenants in 284 units not owning a vehicle, all of them being physically and mentally able and willing to rely on other modes of transportation. The TIA does mention, oh, there will be a small spillover parking, and this neighboring streets can absorb that. That is inaccurate. The TIA emphatically but incorrectly places the burden on the existing community to adapt to this development and change. Such a sophisticated owner, aware of the zoning before purchase, should adapt their development plans to respect zoning rather than expect the community to absorb the entire burden. The very large penthouse amenity is more akin to a fifth story rather than the permitted projection within the intended scope of Section 64 of the zoning bylaws. Under urban design guidelines for low-rise infill in Section 4.6 of the official plan, seeks to enable the sensitive integration of new development while considering livability for all. New buildings must integrate architecturally to complement the surrounding context. The design of this addition does not fulfill these guidelines. The proposed west side yard setback does fail to provide ample separation from the neighboring building, as evidenced in the drastic elimination of sunshine shown in the shadow study. The Old Ottawa East Secondary Plan acknowledges the importance of a diverse range of housing options to ensure affordability. We've heard from the owner. The Lee's LRT adjacent high-rise rental apartments, comprising 1/3 of Old Ottawa East population, offers diverse housing options. We haven't heard, and I agree with Councillor Troyster in terms of affordability, yet the owner's brochure to its investors reports promising returns due to, quote, high quality.
Can I ask you to wrap up? Please?
Sorry?
Can I ask you to wrap up?
All right. In conclusion, this report recommending the applicant's request without changes cites policies and zoning bylaws that are subject to interpretation, as I've indicated. Your mandate to ensure proper investigation can be restricted because of the new introduction of provincial time guidelines for an in-depth review of each application. However, I kindly request that you consider a motion to defer this report to return to the Planning and Housing Committee in order to allow the planning services staff to address the issues raised today and to achieve a most harmonious result for all the parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There are questions, Councilor Menard.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for your public delegation. It's appreciated. I will ask staff about the shadows from the fifth floor amenity space that you have raised. So I'll ask that in the questions to staff a period of time. I did want to ask you about the adaptive reuse of this building. And this is just for you, Adriana. That's okay. These are questions
was for me. Okay.
So I did want to just ask you about the adaptive reuse of the building and your views on that. I know that there are some aspects of this, obviously, that that you take issue with. On the keeping of the property of the heritage building, though, I suspect that this was always going to be developed at some point. You would be in favor of keeping that heritage structure and adaptively reusing it somehow, some way. Though you might take issue with how that's done. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, I mean the community, I believe, speaking on behalf of my neighbors, is happy that there is going to be an adaptive use of the convent. We are just amazed, though, that the amount of the density, the requirement of the parking to zero, even as I said, the urban design of the building itself. It's quite an imposing building. The mass is quite strong. There were the consultations. We didn't really have a lot of answers from the owner in terms of different designs that may be more well-fitting. But our main concern is, of course, this increased density that we see happening in our neighborhood. And I see it every single day with parking, especially in the winter. The off-street parking is, Springhurst is a narrow road. And to place such a massive building, that addition would create even more difficulties. In addition, that, fifth floor is really a fifth story. It's not an amenity projected in what I see. Again, this is what I'm saying. There's a different interpretation. The staff has provided its report based on saying it does fit into the policy. It does do this, but it has to be reviewed more because it doesn't, and it doesn't fit into all these little boxes in order to get these zoning bylaw amendments passed. And we just want to be heard as a community in terms of trying to make a very, as I said, 15-minute neighborhood, allowing people to come to Main Street, come to Old Ottawa East, encourage businesses to, we've got places that need to be leased, and to have that sense.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Curry.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your presentation. So at the end, you said you want us to defer this so that there could be a more harmonious result.
Yeah.
So what does a more harmonious result look like to you? Would it be more parking, shorter building, like a redesign of everything that's been put forward here? So go back to the drawing board?
Not complete, go back to the drawing. About me, as I didn't have an opportunity to speak in terms of you know, my opinion is that, you know, I'm seeing all the time that there are sophisticated developers. They know what the zoning bylaws, they know anything, and we know they want their financial stability. They also want to contribute to the neighborhood. I'm not saying it's all about finances, but they're trying to maximize financial returns and so forth without consideration of everything. I'm just wanting a compromise, a redevelopment. Do you need 284 units? In their brochure, they say, oh, shared accommodations are more affordable than studio units. Yet 76% of the units are studios. So I know we're not here to talk about the type of housing, but it does play effect into the policies of the official plan, the policies of the city about affordability, the policies about transportation. Yes, that's all very important. There has to be some sort of compromise. It can't just be, all right, here it is, and we can fit it in these little boxes of, it fits in the policy, it fits in that. I just would like a more thorough review, a consideration of the future of Old Ottawa East with increased density. There were well-intentioned planning decisions when Greystone was developed. They blew up. You know, developers asked for more, they got more. And this has increased traffic. It has, from people coming in, long-term care facility, and these are all wonderful things, but we have to not keep going and saying, okay, let's keep going with whatever units are requested. Why don't we say, let's scale back? The need in our community is, of course, housing, but what they're targeting, I really do believe that in their brochure too, they talk about, the company talks about school housing. With all due respect to the owner here, I mean, this is the model as they have been doing in different areas. And in our community, we do have right beside the LRT, a number of apartment buildings with students, families, young professionals.
Sorry, Adrian,
seniors.
if I may, I think the counselor asked, you know, what.
Yeah, so what I would like, Counselor, thank you for that question, is just let's look at it again. When there were public discussions, many concerns were not addressed. Councillor Menard's concerns were about transportation and about affordability. Councillor Menard's concerns were addressed in terms of changing the number of units, but there are still a lot of other concerns that were not thoroughly addressed. And that's what I would like. I would like, as you said, perhaps a redesign. That fifth story amenity is, you know, there are other options that the owner can take that would at least address some of the concerns of the community. I mean, we're all in here as a community, happy neighbors, happy community. We all want to work together for the betterment of Old Ottawa East. So I really urge you, just a deferral, a motion, because I fear that, you know, I appreciate with these new provincial guidelines, applications have to go. I appreciate what is going on, but I just want you to kindly just take a step back and think about it. And you all have concerns, and I really doubt. I'm sorry. I should just.
Counselor, has your question been answered?
I think I understand what you're wanting. Okay,
you.
thank you.
I apologize for getting, my mouth is dry, so I tend to speak louder.
It's
So my apologies.
this is the opportunity to say it to us. So
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Adriana, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions. We do have two more public delegations. Ron Rose is with the Old Ottawa East Community Association. Ron, come on down, and I think you have a presentation to make, so we'll make sure that that is queued up for you. And welcome to Planning and Housing. You have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to address you to express our concerns with this proposed development. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Old Ottawa East Community Association. Next slide, please. There is much to like about this proposal. It promises much needed semi-affordable housing. I initially said affordable, but today's debate indicates that there's a question about that. It repurposes a building important to the heritage of our community. It provides a much needed mid-block connection between the community to the north and the shops and schools of Greystone Village. We also appreciate, Mr. Chair, the fact that the developer has reached out to consult with the community and with the councillor and has listened to and occasionally accommodated our concerns. But there are also some significant problems. And today I wish to discuss the density of the development, residential parking, and the location of the amenity space. Density. The community believes that the proposal plans for too many units. The entire area, which includes 15 Desoblatz, was planned for 1,000 dwelling units, and this target has already been exceeded. The 284 units in this proposed development alone would represent almost 30% of that target. The problem is that services for this area, including the redesigned Main Street, the street system within Greystone, were designed based on the target of 1,000 additional units. Exceeding this target will place a future strain on the services and the road network already implemented. We urge the committee to direct staff to work with the developer to provide a reduced number of dwelling units. Residential parking. Next slide. The existing zoning requires 136 residential parking spots, yet the developers are proposing to provide 0. As has been mentioned, it's inconceivable that no one in the 284 residential units will own a car and be looking for on-street parking within the community. Indeed, the developer's own consultant recognizes that there will be pressure for on-street parking in the community and suggests that it be dealt with in a way that the community finds condescending and offensive. Next slide. The consultant's report suggests the existing community will need to evolve with the community and adapt their mode of travel to reflect the path the city has charted forward, with a decrease in auto modes and an increase on pedestrian, cycling, and transit trips. The community of Old Ottawa East has already embraced active transportation. We now have 4 OC Transpo bus routes serving the community where there used to be 1. We are blessed with a well-used network of cycling lanes on both sides of Main Street, along the canal and the Rideau River, including the Flora footbridge. It is inequitable to require the community to, quote, suck it up, unquote, and absorb the entire burden of the extra parking generated by this development. The consultants have already admitted that it is possible to provide some residential parking with reconfiguration of their design. So we would urge the committee to direct staff to work with the developer to provide some residential parking, which must be either below grade or obscured from view. Next slide. Location of the amenity space. The current 4-story building is zoned for 4 stories. To the north on Springhurst and okay. never mind that. Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. The photograph to the right illustrates the split zoning between Springhurst on the right, which is 4 stories, and Desoblatz on the left, which is zoned for 6 stories. If you wanted to place an amenity area on top of this building, it would seem logical to place it where you have zoning room, not in a location which will require a zoning bylaw amendment. The proposed location overlooks a condo building to the west and a residential area to the north. Relocating the amenity areas to the southeast would overlook a street and a community center. We humbly request this committee to direct staff to work with the developer to relocate the amenity spaces to the south or central parts of the development.
Ron, on that note, I'll just note that you're out of time. Did you have one last wrap-up slide?
This is a good start, Mr. Chair, but we request the committee to direct staff to go back and work with the developer to address these 3 concerns. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Bernard has questions for you, Ron.
Thanks so much, Chair. I just wanted to thank Ron and the Community Association for the work you've done on this. You've helped improve it a lot. I know that pathway has been an important issue, the adaptive reuse of the building, of course, and then the keeping of a public park that'll be created here. And I know the community's been instrumental in the work you've done there, and I think you've been reasonable here in terms of a balance of approach. So just wanted to say thank you in your approach. And if there's, I guess, one thing that the one big piece that you would really want to see here, I know you mentioned 3, but if there's one that you had to pick, which one would it be?
Can you repeat that, please, Councillor?
I was just saying that if there's one thing in particular that you would really like to see changed, that we can continue working with the applicant on towards council and beyond, what would that be?
I would suggest that working at reducing the number of units would also help to address the parking issue as well. If the number of units were reduced, residential parking could be included under the new wings that are being proposed. So that would solve 2 of those 3 major problems.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. I have a question with respect. There's a statement that you made in your presentation that it is inconceivable that only a few people would bring cars. I'm frequently frustrated that this assertion is out there. When I was a community association president arguing for less parking in buildings in my neighborhood in Hintonburg 10, 11, 12 years ago, I believe I asked, it would have been Ian Cross was our statistician for the numbers with respect to car ownership by dwelling type. And in 2012, it would have been coming from the census, I believe, slightly more than a majority of people who lived in multi-residential housing in the central area of Ottawa lived car-free. So that's obviously tens of thousands of people. I've since checked with the Ministry of Transportation, and every year, fewer and fewer 16-year-olds are getting their license. My son is one of them. He's now 23. I hope he doesn't hear me forget how old he is. And certainly no interest in getting a license. He's got a lot of options. It is not inconceivable to me when in 2012, a majority of people who lived in Ottawa's central area in multi-residential housing did not have cars, that for this number of units, 264 households that are furnished, that they're not going to be able to find people who are living car-free. What is your evidence for the inconceivable nature of an assertion that they can have people move in with no cars?
Well, thank you very much for that question. My comment was that it's inconceivable that not one or no one of the residents. And it's 284 residential units. I have no empirical evidence. I am just saying that I cannot conceive of a situation where not one of 284 or residents of 284 units, particularly in the city of Ottawa with winter conditions, would not want to have a car.
Okay, we're not supposed to debate here today, but if you are able to bring some quantitative evidence to the table before council of your position, I'd be interested in reading it. I do frequently look at the data, and it is very conceivable to me that people living in this area would be able to live car-free. We are approving thousands of units every 2 weeks at this committee that have parking. There are lots and lots of buildings going in with parking. When you're told by the landlord that parking is not on-street parking is not a viable option, I have to disagree with the use of the word inconceivable. Ron, thank you for your delegation today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
And our final public delegation on this is James McPhee, who may be online. Just wanted to say as well, I'm at this development at least once a week by bike. If you have not tried Tartelette, that is going to be a crazy bike destination on that Grande Allée. Very exciting.
Yeah, the Main Street bike lanes are the best, some of the best in the whole city too.
Yeah. We're 7 minutes away by bike here at City Hall. Mr. McPhee, are you free? Or sorry,
Yes.
Are you available?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Mr. McPhee, you have 10 minutes. Welcome to 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks very
Again.
much.
I'm losing it.
Thank you,
Good
Chair.
call.
Thank you, everybody else, for having me for a few minutes here. So just a real quick background. I live in Greystone, right behind St. Paul's. I live in a bachelor here. I've looked and been working around this area for the last 2 years of development. So I'm very well acquainted with it. I bike and I run winter and summer. And I also have 3 vehicles after downsizing. This community is an older aged community with new people coming in, which is great. And I think that the plan here to use the nunnery and to establish some sort of use for it is wanted by all, because nobody wants to look at a vacant building. A few points: 284 units, 136 spaces originally, going down to 0. I won't say that it's untenable to find actual 0 people that have cars, but I'll say that human nature is what human nature is. So in these buildings alone, in the one that I'm in right now, where I live in a bachelor, many of these buildings came with a substantial amount of parking, but some units did not come with any. People are constantly in these units trying to barter or pay for parking of spaces that aren't being used, or they use the side streets. That's the reality, which is the people moving into these units still require the parking, because nobody actually lives, or not that I've encountered in this community, within a 15-minute space of their living space and never travel. So there's other requirements, including work, that just isn't feasible. So out of that, the 284 units with 0 parking is a problem for me. If I think it's cost prohibitive on behalf of the builder side, then so be it. But I haven't seen the numbers, and I'm assuming the planning committee has, and say that digging under an existing situation would be untenable. If that is the case, then there has to be some mitigations with respect to the neighborhood and strategy, and some realization, facts and logic based with no emotion, as to how is the community currently running. Right now, if you look at this building, if you look at Springhurst, which is the border of north of this building, Springhurst is a one-way street. It's a single lane. As soon as you do add snow to that, it becomes even worse. What Springhurst does is brings you into Rosemere Avenue. Rosemere is, again, a residential 2-lane road, but it has restricted access and does not permit left turns. So if you were trying to leave this unit, it won't permit left turns during certain hours of the day, and will force all traffic through the entire community. So on the other side, Oblatz, obviously 2 lanes with sidewalks, with limited or no parking with respect to the 2 car share plans there. So with respect to that flow through of traffic of this plan, everybody's coming through Springhurst. They're doing either drop-offs, pickups, whether it be paratranspo, whether it be visitors, whether it be Ubers, whether it be whatever. But then they're going right into Rosemere, which is limited access with no left turns. If you take the other side of this and you look at Oblatz on the south side of this this situation, if you go directly down Oblatz right now, it currently is a very tenuous single lane road because there's parking on both sides. If you add snow to it, it's barely a single lane because we're navigating in and around people's bumpers to try to get down that road. Having said that, you get to Oblatz and you get to the end of that, and there's the Elizabeth Briere Center. It actually turns into a dual bike lane / single lane road, which is not indicated as a one-way, but it is a one-way further from Greystone. So you actually end up into a dead end. And then on the left is all private unassumed roads, multiple private unassumed roads, which says do not enter private unassumed. So you end up with a almost virtual dead end if you continue down Oblatz to the end. And then if you come up through my way, which is in behind St. Paul's, where the new construction of the third tower is happening in Greystone, you'll actually come into de Mazenod. De Mazenod is currently undergoing construction right now, and it looks like it's going to be single lane one way in a counterclockwise circular fashion, which matches what the end state is on the pathway bordering the river. So you'll have a counterclockwise circular fashion, which we already have signs up, which is no throughfare. You can't drive through Mazenod and drive to the next community, which is our park, right? So there's no throughfare. It forces you around that circle and then spits you back out. Apologize for that. Spits you back out. So your ingress and egress plan for the community ends up being 1 to a maximum of 2 roads. And then if you add that, the mitigation required for both the snow removal, which we found this last winter was an issue because there's private and then there's public assumed road snow removal. If that snow removal is not done in a timely fashion and we get wind rows and snow rows and ice rows, there will be no parking. There has to be a mitigation strategy with respect to even when you do the snow removal, where do people put their cars? So the reality is, and I hate spending all my time just on cars here. The reality is people are going to bring their cars. People do travel and people do need their cars. Not everybody will need cars, but I would suggest to you that 50% of the people here will sign any lease that says you shouldn't have cars and parking on the streets is not usually viable. I got told the same thing coming to Greystone, but there is a geographical requirement to have me here. So in the end, people will end up bringing them. Do I think that having bikes 1.3
James,
per unit is going to help? Okay. So
Yeah,
I'll sum up with we need stats with the reality of we don't use rental bikes. I don't see everybody getting on their bike, even able-bodied people. What I do see is a lot of scooters, and I don't see anything in that plan for that. And I have further questions on the heritage aspect. Thank you for your time.
James, I'm going to cut you off there, but I note that your Councillor Menard does have questions for you.
Certainly.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for speaking today. Just wanted to ask, because you're obviously aware of the site here, and we're aware that the winter issue and the clearing issue there. I know we've exchanged emails with our excellent operations staff, and I know as a new build area, this is one that obviously we need some uptick in support there. I know we've been on site a few times with my team talking to them about those issues. So appreciate you raising that one. Related to the site, how has the transit been through there? When this site got built, transit was routed off of Main Street into the Greystone development, through and onto Oblatz and back down Main. I'm wondering how you feel that's been working on the site.
It's pretty funny actually, because the articulated buses, which I kind of laugh at every time, I'm sure you guys all laugh inside. Every single time we have 2 inches of snow, the turns for the articulated buses cause them to be stuck, and then nobody can get by anywhere. In my view, the actual facts are that happened last winter 4 times, where the bus was actually stuck in the middle of 2 different intersections. The intersection either being the entry via the St. Paul's entry, or the exit on turning left back onto Oblatz. Was actually where the articulated buses get stuck all the time. I would recommend we never have articulated buses come down in any inclement weather. Having said that, the road width is very narrow, so having those buses there is great. I just would submit that if they're actually sitting there as a rest stop, they just shut the bus off. But having it turn in there is an option for St. Paul's, and it's helpful. But also knowing that there's surplus capacity at St. Paul's and the residents, because right now we know the military is using it for coursing, and as well the Red Blacks use it for housing as well. So there is surplus capacity there, which leads me into another one, and I don't want to digress, which is, what is this housing aimed at? Is it student? Because I don't think that that's the actual case here, but there's a lot more questions on that. So the issue I have is, if you're aimed at seniors, which can walk or can't walk, then the sidewalks have to be cleared, and so do the roadways. And seniors may or may not be able to take that bus. They may require paratranspo, so you have to aim it at everybody. And then there's people like me as well that are getting up there in years. But there has to be options. And I'm just looking at the entire community as a risk mitigation with, how do we risk mitigate the offset of a zero car capability with respect to that many units of 284 without having a huge negative impact? Because I see it right now, the amount of tickets being issued using the public lot that's on Oblatz attached to one of the condos. Has there been negotiation with that public lot to assure that there's enough spots that can offset in that public lot on Oblatz, that you can have overnight parking, which we've used on a frequent basis, even this last winter, to do overnight parking when we've had snow clearing?
Okay. Thank you for your delegation. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. So those are the public delegations that we have. We'll open it up for questions to staff. Councillor Kelly.
You're on mute, Mark.
Thanks, Councillor Menard. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, everybody. I do have some questions and concerns and comments in regards to the parking or lack thereof. I do think it's conceivable that we'll find people to live there perfectly fine who may or not need access to a vehicle, and that some of the measures that are put in place that we've discussed today would be sufficient for those people. What I find inconceivable is that we seem to be okay with excluding people. So because people who need cars also need housing. So when we put a development forward and approve it with 0 parking spaces, we are basically excluding people who work in the trades, people who drive delivery vehicles for a living, some cab drivers who own their own vehicles, particularly accessible cabs, which I know some of us were chatting about very recently. And so I cannot comprehend how we, is this a conscious decision that we're making as a city to exclude these people in the hopes that they will just be able to find housing elsewhere? Because we've been approving a lot of developments at this committee that don't meet the minimum parking standards. And I'm just wondering, is that something that we're okay with as a city? Where are those people supposed to live? I know many people who work in the trades that need a vehicle. They often work outside of the city, but they live in the city, and they need housing and affordable housing as well. So I do see major issues with providing absolutely 0 parking. And I was just wondering if the staff could comment on, what the rationale here and just whether or not we're thinking about all of these other people who may require a vehicle, who also require places to live, and how we can be okay with this.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure how I'm going to respond to this other than that's a very high level comment I have to digest, but it's to me, it's a little bit in the category of people zoning. We're not setting up this development for a particular user. I can appreciate the conversation of someone maybe not wanting to go there if they own a car, which they would be excluded from maybe wanting to look at a development of that nature. But we do set up this development to provide a variety of options. And I'll remind the committee that part of the zoning requirements do require car share spaces. There's 2 dedicated car share spaces on Oblatz, and the ability to add 5 more car share spaces within the visitor parking lot. So residents coming into this development will have access to a vehicle, albeit not a private vehicle. There is access to all modes of transportation.
And those measures are enough to mitigate the, I think, obvious concerns and things that would happen when we completely eliminate a minimum parking standard. So if we have a minimum parking standard, it must be for a reason. And so when we go from that minimum standard down to 0, are we just accepting? Like, I have a really hard time understanding how that's not going to affect, like some of the public delegates have said here today, they live in buildings that are close by with limited parking, and that they do see parking spilling out onto the street and issues occurring as a result of that. So do we feel that the measures that have been put forth, such as, you know, a handful of car sharing spots, as able to mitigate the concerns that we've heard quite clearly from the people who already live in that neighborhood today?
Chair, staff are quite comfortable and supportive of our recommendation. There was a lot of review and changes that happened throughout the course of this application. And I have no problem telling you that at the beginning of this application, we flagged concerns with the parking reduction. And what that did was allow a conversation to happen where originally the proposal had less visitor parking than what was required. And working with our parking studies group, we upped the visitor parking to meet the minimum requirement. And we started to engage in a conversation. And I heard a lot of buzzwords today about mitigation, compromise, and human behavior. This application before you is a model example of what a developer should do when they're going to make a significant parking reduction. I don't know what else we can do on this site. There's car share spaces. There's the notices on title. Bicycle parking is 1 per bedroom, not 1 per unit, 1 per bedroom. There's access to visitor parking for bicycles. There's also the rental opportunity for bicycle. So this development, although bicycle focused, is actually well-rounded in all modes of transportation. That's exactly what we want to see happen when there's a parking reduction on the table.
Thank you very much for taking the time to answer those questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Bernard.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I did want to comment that there are certainly cities that have been moving towards the elimination of mandatory minimum parking standards. Edmonton has just done this recently in the City of Toronto. Or Edmonton did actually, I think, in 2020. City of Toronto in 2022. And I know it's an adjustment. And I think to Councillor Kelly's a point, there needs to be obviously a lot of mitigation that goes on with this, and I couldn't have imagined a lot better mitigation than what we're seeing here in this area. This is certainly a 15-minute community. It is a walkable, bikeable community. It is transit friendly, as you heard. Transit goes into the site, and people drive here too. And so what we've seen is about 6 different TDM measures that I think will really help in this regard. I think you are going to see a population that is coming in and out of these units. There is going to be a high student population here, going to St. Paul's, going to University of Ottawa, going to Carleton University. That's, I think, what there's a design here for. You think about student residences, and many of them don't have, some of them have parking available, some of them do not. So it depends on where you are. With regard to this, on the staff side, the specific measures that they're putting in place with over 400 bike parking spots, the rentable bike share, the car share option, of course, the transit option there, the walkability here. You're within 15 minutes of a grocery store, within schools, within amenities in this space. It's really a tremendous space in the city to live, work, and play. And I think that hopefully there's definitely an appreciation of the type of city we wanted to build within our official plan in this area. I did want to comment and just ask about a couple of questions that my community has raised around on the shadow impacts of the 5th story there. I did look into that. I did chat with staff and the developer at that point. It didn't seem to be too impactful, but I wanted to double check. Is there a large impact with that shadow from that 5th story? And what might it be if there is an impact?
Mr. Chair, so I'll just state that we don't typically require shadow analysis for a low-rise structure such as this. The proposed addition is largely compliant with the existing zoning as mentioned by the applicant. For the permitted projection, the structure is set back to minimize the shadowing impacts amongst other perceptions that it's a larger building. But I will say that the as of right shadow of of a 6-story building, which is permitted on the southern portion of the site, would have a much larger impact on the community if it were to be at the current scale of the existing building. So if that were to go up 2 additional stories, it would have a far greater impact than the proposed structure.
That's appreciated information. And I know, the community association generally supports the adaptive reuse of this building. They've been pretty steadfast in the fact that it's nice to keep this heritage structure there and to utilize it in a way that they knew would be developed at some point. And nice to see that the building's not just knocked down and the tower put up. There's a lot of unit potential within that space. And I guess to that, in that regard, what changes have been made with regard to community input, specifically around the concern for the road capacity and parking provisions to support the density? Obviously, we heard about all the TDM measures. Are there other areas that you've made changes to respond to that concern?
Yes, so we, as mentioned, we did involve our parking services staff early on in the process to understand the parking issues in the area. And this wasn't known to us at the time of when we had the public consultation. And we wanted to get a sense of the potential impacts that would occur should there be any spillover. So that's when we started doubling down on the transportation demand management strategies.
That's sorry, go ahead.
And yeah, so the measures that we've listed have evolved over time and have become far more robust as a result of consultation and negotiations with the ownership team.
Thank you very much for that. There's been a discussion about that pathway through the community. I'm just wondering, the details of the lighting of that pathway is not finalized yet. I know its surrounding buildings will provide some light, but I just wanted to ask about that pathway and what kind of measures might be put in place there for that access from Springhurst over to Oblatz, and what you might be thinking there in terms of lighting and that access.
Mr. Chair, thank you for that question. So this element will be further developed through site plan. A plan which includes the proposed location of a lighting can be asked for, and we could emphasize that it be designed in a way that improves safety within this space, and that could be added to the approval. But I will also mention that by nature of this development, there will be more eyes on this space, including the units that overlook the space to the existing building to the west. But we could also, because this is an ongoing site plan, involve our colleagues with Ottawa Police Services to assess this from a crime prevention through environmental design perspective, and to see if there's any additional measures that can be taken. I'll also just end off by saying that there is an entrance on that location as well, so it will be traveled fairly frequently.
Yeah, this is an area where you're blocked off from getting there. You'd have to go all the way around. It's a needed pathway. And so, and SEPTED it is all well and good. I guess what I'm most concerned about is the functionality of the pathway, the accessibility of the pathway, which I think we're going to be able to work through on site plan and appreciate that. The public park that is supposed to be created here, how would that come to be in terms of development of the site? When would it, for example, get transferred over to city hands? Just timeline wise, what would, I guess we're at the will of when they actually decide to put shovels in the ground and make a change here. But is there any information you could provide on that, the public park side?
Thanks, Chair. So through the zoning, we've carved out the area that the park will be located on the corner there with the O1 zoning, which is typical of our park space, and that zoning was confirmed by our parks colleague. The next step will be through the site plan control application. There'll be a condition on our agreement for parkland conveyance. So you'll see land conveyance in this case instead of the typical cash in lieu, which we see on other developments in this area. Generally speaking, we usually have that land conveyance occur along with the site plan agreement being registered on title. And then depending on construction needs or staging, there becomes a conversation between our staff and park staff about the timing of the city taking ownership of that. Running parallel to that process, though, parks will run an independent consultation process for the final design of that park. So your zoning and site plan process will secure the area and as well as the land and city ownership.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. I guess my last question is just around the concern of, I guess, the parking piece. So is it city staff's experience that when you add parking to developments, there are more cars utilizing that infrastructure in and around that development? Or has it been your experience that if you reduce the parking, there's fewer cars in and around that development accessing it because the parking, there's fewer spaces there? I guess, do you have experience in that? What's your assessment of that?
Chair, I'm going to cautiously generalize this response in saying that we are seeing more and more applications, whether it's low rise, mid rise, or even high rise along our transit corridors, going more the route of parking reductions. I don't think we've seen enough of that build out to understand the full implications of that parking reductions as we're adding those transit demand strategies. But certainly from a construction and market point of view, we are seeing developers utilize that more often than we had in past years. So I can only infer that when you don't build the parking and set up a development to signal that, you know, this is a development geared towards alternative modes of transportation, that change in human behavior and shift will occur naturally.
Okay, thank you very much for this. And I just want to plug this area one last time. Obviously, Greystone's developed, there's been adaptive reuse into a school of the Day Chatelet building, as well as OCH looking into affordable housing in this area. The Grand LA, which is going to house the Main Street Farmers Market in the future, is a wonderful amenity in this space. There is going to be fantastic walking, biking, transit infrastructure that continues along this area. And just, you know, really appreciate the community's involvement in creating this with staff and obviously the applicant and the, you know, development teams in this area. So certainly big changes for this community. I think the community is almost, based on this development area, nearly doubled in size over a decade. And so, and that, you know, obviously continues. So there is a lot of change here, but there's so much to be proud of what this area is becoming. And it's exciting to see the businesses on Main Street that are popping up that used to be fully residential fronting on that street and doing very, very well. So, and obviously the community thriving with a new community center that is supposed to go into that Day Chatelet building as well at 21,000 square feet. So just appreciate all the work in and around this area, and thanks to my colleagues for their discussion today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Menard. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start with a very, I guess, a brief note that I think on page 16 of the staff report, the north and south elevations may have been switched around. One side does look more like the north and the south. Just a note before it goes to council. The images that are in the staff report are, you know, they're a little fuzzy, so I can't really see the numbers. What's the height in meters for that little bit with the amenity enclosed amenity space above?
I'll just pull up the elevations. I'll be able to get that information. But we're suggesting that it be maximum height of 4.5 meters, which is a standard height, and it includes any sort of minor projections that would occur above that structure. But I'll see if I can find that information for you.
Chair, while John's looking that up, can I just get confirmation on the point that was flagged on page 16?
Yeah.
I didn't catch that. Apologies.
Yeah, no worries. Page 16, figure 9. I believe that's actually the south elevation facing Desoblatz, and then figure 10 is actually the north elevation facing Springhurst. Minor.
Okay.
Yeah, minor thing just before it goes to council. No, the point of the question about the meters was I know there is some condos to the west towards Main Street, to the west of this building, and where that amenity space is going, where that supposed possible extra floor is going, like I just want to know how close it is to the height of the neighboring building, like if it really is something that's going to be so obtuse.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Are you referring to the setback of this structure to the adjacent building?
So no, so the height in meters, because there was a public delegation earlier that said it's like adding a 5th story and then it's going to add all these shadows. But I note that there are condos right beside it too, right to the west of this building, and based on street view, they appear to be a very similar height with the enclosed amenity area. So I just want to know if it really is that similar, or if it really is that big of a difference that will raise that many concerns.
And unfortunately, I don't have any information on the adjacent building, but I know that that building has limited projections within that space. It was zoned in a similar fashion, split zoned, so that portion of the site is restricted to 4 stories, and they've chosen to locate most of their density of the building towards the southern portion on Desoblatz. And there may be some minor encroachments within that space, but I can't tell you exactly how this building matches up to that one. It'll be, a maximum height of 15 meters, and the additional amenity structure is approximately 4.5 meters.
I will add, Chair, that the final design of that space will be done through site plan, but the way we've set up the zoning in the schedule is there's the 4-story height limit up to 15 meters, which is the part of the building you see framing the street. That amenity level is allowed to go a maximum 4.5 meters above that height. And based on the schedule, it's also a minimum 2.5 meters from the edge of the building. So that's tucked away and set back from that low rise form.
So it gives a bit of an angular plane.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I mean, what we have here is we have a staff recommendation, and even though the local councillor is not on this committee, it sounds like the councillor is supportive. So, because the report just simply said the councillor is aware of it, but it sounds like the councillor is supportive of it.
I'll let Councillor Menard speak for himself, but I believe he'll be supporting the council.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. This will rise to council, and I'm supportive of the adaptive reuse of this building. I think there's a couple little things that we want to figure out with the developer still around the affordable housing piece that I had mentioned, and of course the pathway and site plan, but in general, I'm supportive of the application overall.
Thank you very much for that clarification. It's very difficult to vote against something that has staff recommendation and local councillors supporting. I will say, I just want to ask a couple of questions. So have we ever before, have, I guess, our planning staff ever supported an application or seen an application where the reduction of parking is to 0?
Chair, I can't think of specific examples off the top of my head, but I'd be fairly confident in saying yes. We've also significantly changed our bylaw over the years where any development 12 units or less does not require any parking. And there's also the area Z areas that are close to downtown cores, transit priority areas where the zoning bylaw itself requires no parking.
So down the street from me, there are multiple multi-res buildings that have been built just recently with no parking, but it's not a matter of city staff approving it because we already eliminated the requirement for that.
Okay, so this is not a brand new thing. We have seen this before. Okay, I mean, that helps me. If this were ever something that did not work very well and was causing tremendous problems in this community, would it be very easy to add additional parking later on?
Chair, based on the site design and the adaptive reuse of the building, I would venture to say that it'd be very difficult to add parking after the fact. There is the surface parking lot, which does have the 27 visitor parking spaces, and there's the ability to provide up to 7 car share spaces on this site. Beyond that, if this development is constructed in accordance with those plans, I'd say there'd be limited opportunity to add it after the fact.
All right, thank you. And then the request by the community to save some trees. I guess there were a lot of trees, you're saving one, but to add more trees, you're actually taking away some existing on-street parking to add more trees. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So there's just I believe, a single removal on the Oblatz side, and quite a bit of investment on an improvement on that frontage. So as I mentioned in the presentation, approximately 15 trees will be added to that side. The current layout of that frontage has direct access parking spaces. And the first iteration of the site plan included a few lay-by parking stalls. And we requested that they remove that to have a more continuous frontage, and they were open to that. So we have a sidewalk that will run continuously, save for the 2 car share parking spaces. But otherwise, there's quite a bit of additional plantings within that space.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. I saw that. I thought it is also taking away additional parking, but I guess my overall comment here is that I don't think a deferral is going to help. I don't think anything real would happen with a deferral. I think it would be a long process that would maybe result in not really solving most of the problems. I know communities always feel that way as if they haven't been heard. I think that this is a slightly different situation here where they have been heard on many fronts, but just not all fronts. And that's a tricky thing to do. I've seen that in Canada as well. The one thing I will say is an overall higher level comment, and I think we heard this from the planner, because, Councillor Kelly makes a very good point that, this kind of building potentially discriminates against some people living there. There are other places to live, but the reality is people who need a truck, for their work, not a car share vehicle, people that live in a world where they have to be somewhere immediately, can't necessarily wait for a subway. There are jobs like that. PSWs in particular need to have a car with all of their equipment in it. They can't just constantly be having ride share vehicles. And the visitor parking space on the PSW front here is a good thing because PSWs need parking spaces in front of buildings where if seniors were in these units, they would be at least able to park. So there's sort of the positives and the negatives here on many fronts. But my concern always is if you don't encourage families to live in this area, that's not a good thing. And it's challenging for families to live in this setting with all of these restrictions. It's not impossible, but it is challenging. And I just always want to see developments that are more family friendly. I don't know that this is it. It's challenging to have many kids and no car at all, even just to store it. I hear people, and I hear some of the counselors here saying, the younger generation maybe isn't getting their licenses, but they grew up in a family with a car that they at least had to store somewhere, that they used occasionally to go on a camping trip or whatever it was, but mostly used bicycles and scooters and everything else. The reality is that this is something the developer has to deal with. Who are they going to market this to? Maybe not families, maybe to university students and people who want fully furnished apartments. And those are whoever they are. People aren't offered parking right from the start. That will help. Like you're told right away, there's no parking. There's no parking on the street. There's no parking available here. So this is not the building for you. And look elsewhere. That maybe has to be the case. It seems everywhere we're discriminating against someone, but there are other options. Anyway, very difficult to vote against this on a few fronts when you have a staff recommendation and a counselor who are supportive. But anyway, thanks for the answers.
Thanks, Chair. There was a question earlier about whether or not we're restricting or not building enough homes for people with cars. I just wanted to note that previously today in the Parking and Housing Committee, we approved 664 vehicle spaces for 600 homes in Jockville Road, which is 600 meters from 2 different transit stations. And then Searville Road, it was 1 parking per unit for 356 homes, 400 meters from a transit station. We approve a lot of parking in this committee. I just wanted to sort of clarify. So the official plan, because this is within 800 meters of a transit station, in this case, Lee's Transit Station, it allows staff to consider an applicant request for a reduction of parking to 0. So I get that. Is that an automatic, you can have 0, or what are the specific check marks that an applicant has to meet in order for staff to consider a parking reduction justified and advisable?
Yes, thank you, Chair. That's an excellent question to start off. It is not an automatic. The policy is purposely set up to say that we can consider a reduction, even outright elimination, which is what happened in this case. And I do note that when we first received this application, it was of a conversation of concern about the reduction because we weren't seeing enough of that offset in terms of mitigation and compromise to make sure that if this development's not going to have parking, how is it going to lend itself to make sure that people coming into this building or visiting this building are going to need to use those alternate mode of transportation. So that was very much part of the dialogue of this application, both from working with our planning staff, transportation staff, and even our parking studies group to see what would the impact be on street parking. So it would be considered on a case-by-case basis with the option there of getting all the way up to no parking, but certainly not an automatic. A lot of work went into understanding how we would get down to 0. And a big part of that was the measures we put directly in the zoning with the increased bicycle parking and things of that nature, and other things that we'll do through site plan, through our conditions that we have powers to do.
Okay, so it's site by site, and there's a number of different factors that might come into play. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I don't think it should necessarily be an automatic thing that we approve 0 parking when it comes in front of us, but I think in this case it is justified in a good location. Also in the report notes, it's in a neighborhood that scores very high on walkability. And I think there's a French Catholic school being built right nearby as well. So it could actually be a very good place for a family who wanted to live without a car. Anyhow, that's it. Thanks, Chair.
Councilor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I appreciate that there's going to be a variety of housing. I mean, you only have to look at, I was just looking at Google Map, and there's townhouses there. There's all kinds of, this is a blend. And obviously not everyone's going to pick being in an apartment that is fully furnished, et cetera. I just wanted to go back to what I was asking developer in terms of property management and how that's worked into the site plan application, because now that we can say that tenants have to know that that it's highly advisable, that they know that on-street parking is not a good idea, and how that's enforced and how residents can raise those concerns.
Mr. Chair, I mean, we'll include a condition in the site plan that speaks to the property management and the services that they'll offer, as well as the understanding of you know, what the obligations of this this property manager are, and in ensuring that residents know the most efficient way of getting to their destination and the options that are available to them, as well as the obligations to monitor the visitor parking lot and the ratio of the car share to the visitor parking spaces.
Okay, appreciate that residents who live there can reach out to someone, but those who don't live there, who have concerns about the property, because I've had issues in the past about properties that aren't well managed in terms of littering or whatever. And is there someone, or this parking concern actually, is that the developer has said that there will be a phone number that will be displayed. How is that enforced or incorporated into the site plan?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure strictly about the enforcement, but this is a case actually where the developer proposed this property management approach as part of their transit demand strategy. It would not be typical of a site plan condition, but they acknowledged and agreed that they would want to do that as a condition to make sure that there's oversight on how the site is set up. Enforcement, I believe would come back to typical bylaw complaints. And, if there was enough complaints on this property, I'm sure the bylaw officers would know the direct contact of the property management office or have that number. But it would be on a complaint basis as I see it.
Okay, thank you. I think it also should be noted that this is being said it's going to be rental, but that is up to the developer. They could have made it a condo. It's not a requirement of us, or it's their decision. So if they change their mind further down, they could make it condominiums or in the future. Is that correct?
They would have to apply for a plan of condominium at that time, and we'd have to review it against our policies at that time.
Okay.
But as we know it now, it's intended to be rental. Yes.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's just to let people know that those are things that can happen, that this is the decision right now. It could be a retirement home, maybe. I don't know. Considering the neighborhood, especially with no parking for people who are not driving anymore. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out and appreciate your work on this file. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanaugh. Are there any other questions of staff? Seeing none, I mean, I will just say I'm a couple blocks away from Tunney's pasture. And we've been allowing a number of no parking, so not even including visitor parking buildings that are multi-residential. I live on a street that is characterized by semi-detached and even single detached homes. And people are not parking on our street, except for many of the homeowners who are parking their second cars and third cars for which they don't have room, and staff who are working on Wellington Street. Some people do move into these buildings with a car, right? Like, I'm not going to pretend that doesn't happen. And then they call my office because bylaw is on them. They're getting ticketed. We have daytime winter parking bans, nighttime winter parking bans. The snow clearing is such that you can no longer park safely on the street for much of the winter. They call my office looking for help, and I'm very blunt with them that I have no help to give, right? There are ways in which you can live in Hintonburg with a family, with cars. Unfortunately, it's very expensive, right? If you want to buy a property that has attached vehicle or your private storage for your vehicle, most people can't do it, right? The prices in Hintonburg and Westboro are through the roof. The only way we're going to be able to the only way we're going to be able to facilitate people of all income levels to live in our neighborhood is to encourage more of this kind of development that doesn't add the cost of parking onto the rent, that is car free, that doesn't take up space with surface parking. Right, we're doubling down on intensification, and no parking buildings are a deliberate choice on the part of council. We've said that we're going to facilitate this through our official plan. So I am fully supportive. For those folks who move into these buildings without a car or with a car, when they hear that they cannot live viably in these buildings with a car, they move. And it's unfortunate. I know that's extremely stressful for people, which is why I keep talking to staff about the need to warn people very explicitly, you can't park on the street here, right? If you're going to move into this building, you can't park on the street. There might be street parking available. You're not going to be able to use it. It's critical that we be really, really blunt with people, because the stress of moving into a building and then finding out that you can't, in fact, park sustainably on the street is more than people should have to bear. But there are hundreds, soon to be thousands of people who are moving into the great neighborhoods that we're building along LRT without cars. And it's very sustainable for them. You can move into our neighborhood with a car, but you have to find a unit that has private vehicle storage as part of it. And unfortunately, near LRT stations, that's going to cost money. It costs a lot to try to find something that has parking, and I don't have the silver bullet on that. I will leave it there. Colleagues, is this item carried? Carried?
Carried.
Sent from Councillor Kelly. Thank you, Councillor Kelly. All right, we will move on. Our final item is Armstrong. Where is Armstrong? So Armstrong, I haven't asked for a performance. This is a file that, as far as I'm concerned, should have been in front of the Committee of Adjustment with respect to the need for a zoning, but we do keep seeing these in front of the committee. I have a delegation. I have Jack Billen and Eric Beanwright from Lion Trade, who are the applicants who are prepared to speak. Jack and Eric, did you want to make any comments before we hear from our public delegation? There isn't going to be a presentation on this one outlining what the development is. We'll give them a moment to come in. Eric, did you want to take, if you'd like to, you've got an opportunity now to make a short presentation to the committee if you'd like.
Speak very briefly about it. I mean, you presented, this is quite minor as a request. The only real reason that we have to go through this is because of the irregular shape of the lot. You also note we built a very similar building that has the exact same footprint in Beechwood on Champlain Avenue. And this one mirrors that exactly. But because of the shape of the lot, we actually had to, increase the footprint in terms of the percentage of the rear yard setback, which is exactly what we are requesting here. One thing that was not noted is we will be making 2 of the units affordable housing units. That is consistent with what we did in Beechwood, and it worked out well. And so we'll be doing that. And then as was mentioned throughout the past presentation, this is a 12-unit building, does not require parking as part of the city guidelines and is presented as such, especially given its proximity to the light rail. We find that this is quite conducive and adds a good mix of 2-bed and 1-bed units, and also a mix of type of 2-bed units with larger 2-bed, 2-bath and smaller 2-bed, 1-bath. I'll leave it at that, but happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Eric. I know someone will ask, so when you say the 2 units are intended to be affordable, is that a market definition of affordable or deeply affordable?
It's the definition according to CMHC. I believe that's 1535 from memory is the rent for those units based on our comparable building.
Yeah, so that's it'd be about 1,535 per month for a 1-bedroom unit, which would be a reasonably substantial discount from what you could probably get on the open market and on Armstrong and Hintonburg, which would be closer to 2,000 or so a month, is my assumption.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so with that, we have a delegation from Cheryl Parrott. Cheryl, no stranger to the committee. You've got 5 minutes to make your presentation.
All right, and it's thank you. It's fairly short. So we do appreciate, the Hintonburg Community Association appreciates the work of the applicant and the planner to respond to comments that we provided at a meeting that was held with the applicant and the neighbors of the site, and particularly with respect to the increase in the number of retained trees, because trees, we're losing them at a great rate in Hintonburg. And so retaining any of those trees is so very important, the more mature trees. We are, however, very disappointed that the applicant is unwilling to increase the amount of bicycle parking provided. We always make this request on every new proposed development because pretty well everything here has no parking provided. And it's particularly urgent on this site. And part of the reason for that is there's no parking anywhere around. So on Armstrong Street, there's no parking. On Parkdale, there's no parking. Carruthers is so intensified, which is, quite a ways away, that there's no parking left. And Hinchy doesn't have very much at all. So given that, it's really essential that bicycle parking be increased to at least 1 space per unit. And you should have indoor or weather protected bicycle parking that should be provided. And some developers coming forward have done that. They have amended their plans to do that. But unfortunately, this developer has not. And we have supported the R4U zoning, which encourages the construction of low-rise apartments and forbids parking in favor of that soft landscaping and trees. And we fight very hard to keep that required green space in the rear. However, the failure to increase the requirement for bicycle parking to at least one space per unit creates really serious issues with on-street parking, which is already in such short supply in our neighborhood. And we really can't rely on the goodwill of developers to just increase the supply of bike parking beyond the minimum 0.5 spaces per unit. Residents who choose to live without a car will almost certainly own one bike per person, and even a one-bedroom unit may contain two people. So there you need two spots. So we urge you to ask staff to address this serious shortcoming in the R4U zoning to increase the mandatory bicycle parking to at least one per unit. Thank you.
Cheryl, thank you very much. And certainly I'll be taking that to staff. And certainly through the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, I think we absolutely have to take a look at bicycle minimums right across the city. We just saw the Desoblatz lands where they were proposing one per bedroom, which is a good way of looking at it. So we got work to do on that. But Cheryl, I wanted to ask you today, we passed the R4, the new R4 zoning, I guess, 3 years ago. Somewhere around there.
Yeah, probably 3 to 4 years ago at least.
So we have a rezoning today that, again, I'll reiterate, should have been in front of the Committee of Adjustment, but reducing the rear yard space. I know there are occasionally variance requests for the R4 on that rear yard space as well. Are you concerned at all that the R4 has been shown to be a floor from which developers go rather than zoning to which developers are adhering?
They're not adhering. Every application pretty well that comes forward is for a reduction in that rear yard space. And we have been going to Committee of Adjustment and speaking against a reduction in that rear yard space. It's so very minimal to start with. The required soft landscaping is just a little bit bigger than my car, and that can be for 8 units, and that's supposed to contain a tree and any use of the backyard. So, you know, in my mind, it's much too small, but we constantly get every application asking for even more of a reduction in that rear yard space.
Yeah, as opposed to the Westboro infill study, which has sort of stopped the variances because we gave them a box in which the developers are by and large working. The R4 box is one from which the developers continue to seek wriggle room. And I'm supporting today's application because we have a staff recommendation in favor. You know, if this committee were to refuse it, I doubt very strongly that we would have OLT sustain us on it. But what we see with the Committee of Adjustment and, you know, in some cases, these rezonings is staff support. And I guess I am concerned that it is becoming, it's becoming too easy for developers to get wriggle room on the R4 zoning. And that's something that I want staff to be aware of today in terms of moving forward. So I appreciate the delegation, Cheryl.
Yes, no, it's a huge issue for us. I know you don't want me to speak right now, but it's a really huge issue. That constant reduction, and since you brought it up, our concern is that city staff always have no concerns at Committee of Adjustment with that reduction, sometimes of over 2 meters, and it's minimal to start with. Thank you.
No, thank you, Cheryl, and that's well raised, an issue for moving forward, but something I felt was important to put on the table today. Are there any other questions for the delegation? See none, is that item carried? Carried. All right, thank you, and thank you, Cheryl. I believe that's, so the item for Boris O'Kane, I don't think Councillor Hill, so I think we can just speak on his behalf. It is withdrawn. Okay, so we have full written confirmation. We're not going to get in trouble. There are notices of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting. Councillor Kitts, I believe you have something.
Yes, thank you. Do I need to read out this, that it'll be added for consideration as an additional item, please? Or is that okay? We're all good? You can just read the motion. Okay. Whereas the Miracle League of Ottawa is proposing the installation of an additional ground side at Notre Dame des Champs Park, 3659 Navin Road, and whereas the Miracle League of Ottawa is a registered nonprofit charity helping very special dreams come true by providing a facility in partnership with the City of Ottawa that meets the unique needs of players either on the baseball field or playground. And whereas on July 8th, 2015, City Council approved that the baseball field at Notre Dame des Champs Park be named the Jays Care Field in recognition of a funding contribution from the Jays Care Foundation towards the development of the project. And whereas the Miracle League of Ottawa, the Jays Care Foundation, and the City of Ottawa have signed a naming rights agreement dated June 18th, 2015, and have agreed that the baseball field shall be exclusively named the Jays Care Field for the term of the agreement ending on December 31st, 2030. And whereas the proposed sign will provide much needed identification of the Jays Care Field and wayfinding for the facility. And whereas the Miracle League has received a donation for fabrication and installation of the proposed signage. And whereas the proposed signage does not comply with the permanent signs on private property bylaw. And whereas it is recommended to allow this request beyond the general application process for minor variances found in the Delegation of Authority Provisions Bylaw 2016-326, whereas Recreation, Cultural, and Facility Services Department and Planning, Real Estate, and Economic Development staff do not object to the application. Therefore, be it resolved, the committee recommends that Council approve an exemption to sections 114 and 121, Table 1A of the permanent signs on private property bylaw 2016-326, as amended to allow 1, the installation of an additional identification ground sign within 30 meters of an existing ground sign on the same premises and on the same street frontage, and 2, permit a combined sign face area of the 2 ground signs beyond the maximum allowable 5 square meters, but not exceeding 7.35 square meters.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kitts. With respect to that motion, I know it's just noticed today, but yeah, should it, for those exemptions, I don't have the word in front of me anymore, but should it be clear that those exemptions are applied to this property, or is that? We recommend that council approve an exemption, but we don't say for which property. Or is that just understood?
I think that's something that we can address through the notice process and be ready to respond to when we come back. I do note your concern, Chair.
Okay. All right, we'll do it next. Let's fix that language, then we'll come back to it in 2 weeks. Are there any other notices of motion? Thank you, Councillor Kitts. We have no other business. Are there any inquiries? None. We're adjourned. Our next meeting will be on Wednesday, July 5th, which will be our last meeting before our last ever legislative break, before we move into every 2 weeks in perpetuity. Members, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, everyone.
And a special thanks to our legal team and Councillor Kevin.